So there's some conversation right now surrounding Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and this is in regard to the participation of Sweet Baby Inc. This is supposedly some industry watchdog or organization. I don't know exactly what they are, that has been supposedly helping creative direction in video games and in some media. Now, this has been something that actually popped its head up, in my opinion. The first time I actually saw it was when somebody was doing their Marvel Spider-Man review, and that showed up on Twitter and kind of exploded. I didn't know what this was, and until, later down the road when the game came out, I started seeing people talking about this. Some people said even when they mentioned this, they got like some kind of a restriction on their videos, and so on and so forth. Now, this is something where you guys know I've stayed clear of Suicide Squad conversation, because even though it brings in more views on this channel, I had an NDA when we played the alpha, and so I don't want to dance around topics. I feel like if you have to make me pick and choose my words, I just don't feel like I'm serving anybody by dancing around topics. So I've kind of left it alone, and only maybe in some context so you see me talk a little bit about some things. This is interesting because this also came out, and the conversation seems to have kind of moved a slightly interesting direction. So David Haffey put a video out here. I haven't watched it, and I don't think I'm gonna I'm not interested in doing a reaction on it. But here's the video. It says, "Sweet Baby is not the problem, but you might be." Now, knowing from what we actually, have gotten about this particular Sweet Baby Inc., diversity, inclusion, exclusivity is something that they prioritize. Now, my position on this whole DIE thing is that I would rather somebody represent my interest in real life rather than represent what they think my interest would be in fictional media. That's what I think. I think anybody who is championing these particular, incentives, has a lot of time on their hands. That's what I think. I'm not somebody that's frivolous, and you might think differently. You might say, VG, this is something that is sensitive to a lot of people. I understand, but the world that I live in, basically the real world, what is much more important is not somebody seeing themselves in a video game or in a movie. What is actually important is somebody actually being capable of thriving in real life, surviving, and ensuring that they get the very best in regard to what life has to offer them, especially when they're underprivileged in that regard. Some of you know what I do. You know the job that I do. You know the area and the field that I work in. And I do that not because, it's some kind of like financially fulfilling area. It's because I have the opportunity to affect these things. I work in education in the middle school. I'm a middle school teacher, if you don't know what I do. So I'm not sitting here waiting for somebody to say, oh, make me feel good in my belly. I want to help my, students and people that I actually am able to affect in real life, teach them skills and help them to be productive citizens. So when I see this stuff in the media and how it's very emphatic on media, like, somebody wants to make somebody feel good because they could see themselves in some kind of a hero, I don't know how far the extent of that actually goes compared to what it is that people in the real world, social workers, people who are working in law enforcement, different kinds of services to serve people who may require those things in the real world. I don't know to what extent that actually affects and improves their lives. So that's why I'm like, to me, it doesn't really seem like, I should be bothering myself paying any attention, rather paying attention to the scenarios and the situations around me. It's very simple. Now, this is very interesting because I look at a lot of people who tout this stuff, and I wonder what their experiences are in dealing in these situations and these scenarios, that they have to come out here and tell other individuals that they might be the problem. Haven't watched the video, but from the title, I think what's probably going to happen here is how Sweet Baby Inc. means well, and how some people who may have a problem with it are misunderstanding them, or probably have an issue that they haven't internally resolved. This is going to be really weird once I eventually get to watch this video, but let's do this for the sake of, what I think is fairness, and for the sake of making sure that, I understand another person's position. Perhaps we should watch maybe a few minutes of this. This could be educational at the end of the day. I know I said I started this video not wanting to play it, but I have already made a judgment in my mind. And, it's rough to do something like that and not give, a voice to whomever may be saying something. So perhaps I'm missing something, and there's something I possibly, could learn from this. So let's see.
complain about what. Look, you have a right to play what you want, like what you like, complain about what you want to complain about. I'm one of your fiercest allies and advocates in that. I believe very much in being able to express yourself, even if it's shit I disagree with. In fact, especially.
Fair enough. I've heard some of his takes on some things, and I think they're absolutely horse doo doo. In the way he said, just some of his, you know, opinions on things outside of video games. It makes me laugh, and I mean, I could sit here and actually deal with that, but I have no time, and it's not like I'm gonna change his mind on anything. He's a grown adult, so. But this is a fair take. This is something that I think is a standard when it comes to adulting. Do what you feel is necessary, complain how you feel is necessary, and so on and so forth.
But this kind of sweet baby pile on that I'm seeing on the internet where people are like, coming after this company because if you don't know what Sweet Baby is, I'm sure you've heard of it by now, but they're a company in Canada. They offer their services to anyone really, but mostly video game companies where they offer writing, narrative, representation, development services. Mostly what they do is developers, in this case, we've seen God of War has used them, Spider-Man 2 has used them. There have been some games from Square, Alan Wake 2, on and on and on. Warner Brothers, they have a big client list. Okay. And a lot of companies come to them and say, hey, we want our games to be more diverse. We want our games to be more inclusive. Can you work with us on that? Because that's sort of their wheelhouse. They've built a company around the idea that companies, video game companies, media creation companies are going to want more diverse, inclusive, and accurate portrayals of the diversity that they are representing.
Well, I push back because in our video games for the last years, I don't think this has been a problem in entertainment and video game media. In fact, one of the biggest surprises to me was when I realized that the voice actor for Kratos was a black man. I didn't know that. I did not know that at all. And this is not talking about Christopher Judge. This is the previous voice actor. You see, for the most part, I think this again is something that I don't know how this serves real life, especially when I'm already jaded and been put in the situations where I have the opportunity to affect real life. Yet, the escapism and entertainment is something that somebody thinks is priority in representation. What is the outcome? What can anybody tell me the outcome is going to actually affect? If they can convince me that the outcome has some kind of effect better than what I said in the beginning of this video, then I'll say, okay, maybe sure. But I think this is, for the most part, a premise that is kind of weak on its own. This is frivolous at the end of the day. We have too much time. We don't eat and we're full. That's why we have the time to talk about this kind of stuff. And gaming companies have, time to pay a company like this that I think, my personal opinion, is of no value to the creative advancement and enhancement of the video games or whatever medium they're trying to include, because there are writers who can do that. Writers are human beings that live with other human beings that have experienced things with other human beings of different cultures and of different, ethnicities and different experiences. Those writers can recreate those things in the most authentic way in order for them to represent them to us in video games. We don't need anybody else. I don't think so. I think human beings, and if there's a mistake there, or if there's something that human beings, go and say, that's not authentic, we can always give grace and say, well, we can understand this is fictional and the person who actually does, represent this in their writing may not necessarily know. That's human advancement. That we're willing and capable of making errors like this so that other people can provide input and say, oh, well, you missed it on this side, but this is how it usually goes. However, this is fiction. Let's all shake hands and let's say it's all good. I don't know. That's how I see humanity. I like human beings and I like human advancement. So I don't think this really does. And you know what? Let's keep listening. I don't know.
And so that's their shtick, right? That's their high concept. And you can see if you click on these, like God of War, they worked with the team. Narrative character consultant, focus on representation.
To do what in a Norse mythology game? If you were making a game about, say, the Benin Kingdom, of Nigeria, of southern, and you say, okay, we don't have a lot of historical context there. We don't have a lot of, which we do have a lot of writings. We do have a lot of historical records about a lot of these civilizations and the way they've done things. I mentioned the Benin Empire because I'm from Nigeria, and that is one of the empires that actually was in that region in Africa before the British came in and colonized the country. There were all kinds of different empires. If, say, you were looking for that stuff and you went in to do consulting for that, then, great. But what are a bunch of Westerners from Canada going to add to a Norse mythological story? Again, it's long toothed and has basically found itself in an overreaching perspective. So I don't know what David is going to go ahead and say here, but I want to give a
Alan
chance.
Alan Wake 2, they worked on sensitivity reading. Suicide Squad, they worked on script writing, so that may have nothing to do with that. Consultate in terms of diversities. Spider-Man 2, story constellation, on depending on what game. Okay. And people are coming after these guys because it's like, oh, they're woke. What are they called? Sweet Baby Inc. is woke, which I guess by definition they probably are if you use the term the way I think you're using it. And they're ruining games, blah, blah, blah. To that I would say, shut the fuck up, you morons. You fucking idiots. Listen, let me just paint this for you, okay? Let me make it very clear for you. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
DIE, you mean?
It's not a legal mandate, okay? It is a lot of times, a lot of these people who seem to be opposed to anything other than the status quo will go, oh, they have to get these points, these DEI points, or there's another version of it, CSR, corporate social responsibility, ESG, whatever. None of these are legal. Required unless you work for like a government company and they have mandated it, fine, that's its own thing. But if you're talking about a video game company, private or public, no, I'm sorry. Spider-Man didn't have to go to these guys. God of War, Suicide Squad, Motorfest, which is a great game by the way, did not have to go to these guys to get anything in order to get more money or tax breaks or anything like that.
Then why did they go? Why did they just not spend more time enhancing the content of the video games, like adding a new game plus in both the cases of Marvel Spider-Man 2 and God of War Ragnarok, which their new game plus, concepts showed up in the case of God of War later down the road. In the case of Marvel Spider-Man 2 is still being awaited. I'm all about efficiency as well. Seeing that I work in, an area where you basically use what you have for the most part and extend as much as you can. You try not to be wasteful. Try to be as, efficient as you possibly can. I'm thinking, then why did they bother going to do that? Why did they just not take the money and perhaps maybe hire, more people who could actually work on the game and provide the technical expertise? Not saying that, I don't want anybody to eat. If this is their hustle and this is how they eat, hey, I'm not going to knock it. Just saying in the context of video games. And this is what I suspected I was going to see in this video that Hafe was going to make. If you say Hafe, if you make the argument, of which I don't believe it, there are many things that, I don't need to speak about on this video that many of you know from a financial perspective. But if you say that they didn't need to go there because it's not a legal mandate, then why did they go there? Why did they bother?
The only kind of thing that you can see is sometimes with the DEI stuff, public companies, the shareholders will be like, hey, we want to know the company is kind of really doing that sort of shit. Okay, fine. Until, here's the tricky part, okay? Until doing that kind of shit ends up hurting the bottom line.
Oh boy, the bottom line. Okay. So, ideally, a lot of the people who play these video games couldn't even care at all. That's just one of the interesting parts of all of this. There are a lot of wonderful people who are vehemently against these incentives that absolutely do not even care that whether it's Sweet Baby Inc. or whomever is actually doing this stuff and just want to play a video game for entertainment's sake. So right now, we're at the point where in case of video games, it hasn't really started to hurt the bottom line because there's just a lot of video games. You can ignore some, you can play some others. There are other, developers across the world. There's a lot of diversity for real in the consumption of video game media. There's AA that don't have any reason to spend any time or money going to do these incentives, right? They're AA games. They're Japanese and foreign developers out of all kinds of places in the world. You have Asia, you have, Europe, you have Eastern Europe. So everyone is coming with their perspectives, and their video games are representative of it. So right now, there's stiff competition. But it seems like what we're seeing is maybe, say, some of the folk in the AAA side have the opportunity. And I'm not saying, there are no, AA games here, but it seems like the AAA games, they seem to be taking the steps to do that. Maybe some AA games, some, indie games are doing it too. However, as the video game industry continues to be stiff and tight with its competitive edge, eventually this stuff is going to wither away, because that's the thing. The bottom line is eventually going to get affected, because guess who, makes these games that a lot of people also love? The developers from the East, a lot of the East. This is exactly what it is that the contention is. A lot of people like what the Eastern devs are doing for the most part. And eventually they're going to start making enough games where a lot of these games in the West that actually seem to want to prioritize these things eventually fade into oblivion in their eyes. A lot of content is coming out very soon. 2023 was just a start. A lot of these games that sat down during COVID that never got picked up, that eventually got picked up after COVID, and, interest showed, and these games have already advanced in terms of development, you're going to see them show up later on. Even the games that got canceled, like the Star Wars game that was being remade, I don't think that game is done. I think we're going to see that game being done. But let's keep listening.
And the shareholders don't give a shit. Here's how I know, and here's how you should know too. When Bobby Kotick was presiding over Activision, and up until a couple of days ago, and all the money was rolling in like a goddamn avalanche cash into the stockholders' bank accounts, as much as Kotick was reported in the press to be, if not directly involved, although sometimes, but certainly indirectly involved as it relates to enabling a culture of misogyny and lack of diversity and sexual harassment, and sometimes even worse, he was always revoted in, and the board always supported him, and the stockholders always wanted him to stay. So I assure you, if all of these endeavors to diversify these games are actually hurting the bottom line, like a lot of you guys seem to think they are, trust me, the only lever that ESG or DEI has to pull is, we'll not invest in your company and we're stockholders. That won't matter, because they won't invest in a company who's not selling games because they can point to this being the reason. So
hard disagree, sir. Hard disagree. Until you've actually paid, and I don't think Hafe is. I don't know if he's not well informed in this particular area. I'm gonna stop the video soon. It's already stretched too long. Or if he is being careful as to what it is he concludes. And I don't fault him for the latter. If he's being careful in his conclusion, is because we don't know the internal workings of what may be going on here. But there are people who are concerned about this stuff, and people who are holding their wallets back as to how it is they approach these video games in that regard. Does that make sense? I'm an adult. I'm a parent. If what Sweet Baby Inc. or whomever is, recommending to be in these video games are not aligned with the things that I actually do, believe myself primarily, or I feel like they're vehemently against my own basic, notions in terms of how I see reality and humanity, I may purchase the game, maybe not knowing the full context, but the proxies that will game with me in my household, who are my family members, they're not going to touch the game with a 10-foot pole. So this is what these companies don't realize. I think this is probably where Disney is at. Disney is also in this weird place because their audience is actually the parents. They've always kind of thought that their audiences were strictly the children, but the children don't really have money to pay for Disney Plus or go to Disney theme parks. It's the parents, and they are a protective breed. They are a very jealous breed. Parents, that's how they are. I mean, I work with parents as well too, because, I'm working in helping, educate their kids. So it's a universal reality at the end of the day. There's just so much here that, can be expressed. And I know some of you on the channel, you've been telling me to talk about this stuff. And largely, I've decided that, there's probably just no need to talk about it because you all are aware of what's going on. I mean, very intelligent community here. This is the one community that I really enjoy bantering with. But I'm sure we have different opinions on the issue. But I don't think Hafe is spot on here. I think he is, I think he comprehends the repercussions of people actually waking up to seeing that this is something that that is existing in a lot of these video games now and maybe gaining traction. And this is just one place that we know. There could be other organizations who actually, help do this stuff that we don't even know about. Now, am I saying that these organizations are bad? No, I'm just saying that it's inefficient for the game developers to basically or the publishers and the, development firms to be spending money doing this because, again, I don't see how it, number one, advances the development of video game and brings the best quality product to the market. And number two, I don't see how it affects reality in order to really affect the lives of those who may think that, their marginalization or maybe their, underprivilegedness requires them to basically go in and twist media to be able to beam these things into their eyes to create joy and hope. Or maybe I'm reading the whole thing wrong. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out.